Management at a retail store is concerned about the possibility of drug abuse by people who work there. They decide to check on the extent of the problem by having a random sample of the employees undergo a drug test. Several plans for choosing the sample are proposed. Name the sampling strategy in each. For Part A, randomly select an employee classification and test all the people who work in that classification. The classifications are supervisors, full-time clerks, part-time clerks, and maintenance staff. So think about the sampling methods that we learned about in this class and choose one that you think corresponds to this. And we'll ask Sarah at random, which one do you think this is? Okay, well, tell me the ones that you've learned. Stratified. So with stratified random sampling, you're breaking the population up into groups, and it appears that we are doing that here. But you are going to each group and randomly sampling, which is not being done here, because it says randomly select an, meaning one. So what other one do you think it might be? Cluster, yes. So for your information, the majority of people in period 2 said stratified for part A. I disagree. Yes?
Could it also be multi-stage?
Explain how it could be multi-stage.
Because, I mean, you are kind of doing stratified because you go in certain groups. But then...
But with stratified, you're going to each of the groups.
Oh,
Yeah, you're making sure to cover each of the groups. Yep. Here we're just picking a random classification, like supervisors, maybe at random. And then we just go to all the supervisors and give them a drug test. And I guess we're assuming that that represents the population, which certainly might not be true. Any questions on A? Next, choose the fourth person that arrives to work for each shift. Ariel, what method is this? This is systematic. Easy. We have a system to it. Anytime you see, ask every nth person. Systematic, I would say. C, there are 4 employee classifications, just like before: supervisors, full-time clerks, part-time clerks, and maintenance staff. Randomly select 10 people from each category. Dylan? Stratified. Stratified random sampling. D, each employee has a 3-digit identification number. Randomly choose 40 numbers. Abigail, what do you think? Simple random sample. Okay, so obviously know your sampling techniques and be able to identify. Any questions on the top part? Next, explain why the first plan suggested above, sampling an entire classification, might be biased, and be sure to name the kind of bias that you describe. Annika, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that based on the job classifications that they have, the people in those positions, they come from like similar backgrounds.
Okay.
Like they may have similar education.
Sure.
So I think it would kind of be under coverage in the sense that you're only hearing from one out of the 4 categories, but at the same time it'd be over coverage from that one category.
Yes, I agree. So I'm going to answer this in a shorthand type of way. If this was the actual AP exam or one of my assessments or a report you were writing, you would write in full sentences. But I think that the suggestion in letter A can certainly lead to undercoverage. We're just picking one of these classifications. For example, supervisors might get chosen at random and then just doing a drug test there. So I'm basically just paraphrasing what Annika said. The class that gets chosen might not represent the population of employees. with respect to drug abuse. For example, supervisors may have higher education levels, which might be related to propensity to use drugs. Any questions or comments there? So no undercoverage, response bias, non-response bias, and voluntary response bias at a minimum. If you look in the Barron's book, there are certainly other sources, you might find others. Question?
Yeah, could you also say that there would be a non-response bias or was that not?
It could happen. The difference is that undercoverage is something about your sampling method that is leaving out a key segment of the population.
Yeah, like within that class, there would be non-response bias also.
You could, if no matter how hard we try, we can't get these people tested, or like a large group of them tested, sure. Any other questions or comments there? Yes?
So can you also say overcoverage for that one classification?
I think most people would accept that. Yeah. Any other questions there? Okay, moving on. Name and describe the kind of bias that might be present if the management decides that instead of subjecting people to random testing, they'll just hold department meetings and drug test the employees that attend. So we'll start there. Elizabeth, what do you think might be wrong with that method?
You could say that there would be non-response bias because if they don't go, then they won't be drug tested, and it's not an accurate representation of everyone.
Sure. We're only getting the employees that attend the department meetings. So those that don't attend are just not going to be part of the sample at all. And if there's something about those non-attendees that is related to using drugs, then it's a form of bias. Yes?
Could you have like response bias because they might feel like
I don't think response bias because you're giving a drug test. Okay? Yes?
Voluntary response.
Ooh, I like that. Voluntary response bias. So if going to these department meetings is not absolutely mandatory, like you might lose your job if you don't go, then we could certainly have voluntary response bias. So the people who show up might be the ones that are less likely to use drugs. Yes?
Could also be undercoverage because maybe not all employees.
Could be.
So maybe some say
Absolutely. Ambika?
For the non-response bias, we said it wasn't fault, but then if we tell the people, when the people don't have the symptom because they actually do drugs, isn't it wrong?
You could argue that. Yeah, so the question was, is it our fault if we employ this and the people don't show up? Okay, then it's generally considered undercoverage.